Hello, everybody. Every time I come to do a video here, I wonder whether I should or shouldn't. And often I don't know what I'm going to say. And maybe often I just don't really have anything to say, kind of filling in. I can't answer that. But I just want to speak. People might say I'm narcissistic or whatever. I hope not. But I'd like to have something to share with everybody. And a theme that's been on our minds recently, that's been on my mind consistently, has been one of honesty. Honesty. That's a tough order.
Mm-hmm.
That's a tough, dare I say, act.
It rides right against the nature.
It does. It strikes at the heart.
Mm-hmm.
Honesty. I'm always asking myself, am I honest? And I often find myself not being honest. And of course, that can be qualified. You can wonder, what is honesty? If you get thinking about it,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot to think about in different aspects of that characteristic. That
It's surely not just as simple as just saying whatever's on your mind and blurting it out.
right? No,
Yeah.
It's not. And it's not just about stating ordinary facts that are obvious to everybody. It's probably more speaking things that, how can I put it? Martin, you put it somewhere.
Put you at risk. Vulnerability.
Yeah, or maybe put somebody else at risk.
Which is a form of vulnerability, because I think
Right.
the reason we hesitate to put somebody else at risk is because we have our own anxieties about how that will put us at risk.
Yeah,
I don't know that anybody really possesses that much altruistic concern.
it's been such honesty. The call to honesty has been such a test for everybody all the time. And it makes you wonder if it's possible to be honest. And I don't believe that it's possible, to be honest. I think it's an impossibility
For men.
for men. Yeah, for
For
men.
men, these things are impossible.
And with God, it's required.
Right.
That's what He's after. For our salvation, it's not just that we need to be honest for our salvation, but it's like our salvation makes us honest.
Honesty is the salvation. The
Yeah.
ability to have,
Yeah. Truth.
yes, the ability to be honest. Isn't that what salvation is all about?
Yes.
Is being free from your war against dishonesty.
Yes. Yeah.
You don't have to be dishonest.
I've lived all my life in fear of the truth. I've lived my recent life in a battle to conquer falsehood,
Mm-hmm.
to come against dishonesty
Mm-hmm.
in myself.
Right.
And that takes some honesty to say that,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of people don't want to admit that they're dishonest. A
Right.
lot of people don't even know what it means to be dishonest. I'm convinced that a lot of people, well, I'm always telling the truth. I'm not lying to anybody. And you find people that can be very candid,
Mm-hmm.
or they can be very naive,
Mm-hmm.
simplistic in mind.
And there's replacement forms of honesty.
Yeah,
Like people just go, I've been honest in every business dealing.
right.
And it's like, okay, so maybe you've been sometimes even like foolishly honest.
Mm-hmm.
Like you think
Mhm.
that honesty in a business dealing is just dumping all your cards out on the table for everybody to see it so that anyone can take advantage of you.
Right.
and just allowing yourself to be
Right.
pillaged.
Right.
And oh no, I didn't even, that didn't cost me much, so I can't charge you for that because that would be dishonest.
Right.
And people mistake their version of self-righteousness
Yeah.
for honesty.
Yeah.
Whereas honesty would actually be admitting that you fancy yourself more honest than you really are, and you
Yeah.
try to manifest that by being foolishly honest in your business dealings.
Right.
That's what honesty would be.
Yeah.
I like to be seen as more honest than I am by
Yeah.
being artificially honest in this area of my life.
Right.
Right? But honesty isn't just
Yeah.
putting on a show of foolishly giving away information that you'd be.
Right.
You know, the Lord says, "Be wise as serpents, harmless as doves."
There's a good verse right there. There's a good set of words there. From the Lord.
So you know,
Be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. So we tend to ignore the fact that we're living in a very dishonest world.
mm-hmm.
All men are liars, it says in the
Mhm.
scriptures. All men are liars. Dishonest,
Mm-hmm.
right? Not willing to face the truth, not willing to speak the truth.
Isn't that where it started?
Yeah, that's right.
Adam
by the
and
lie.
Eve pointing fingers. This woman you gave me.
Mm-hmm.
Adam was being honest.
That's right. He wasn't being honest.
Because immediately with the guilt comes the dishonesty.
Mm-hmm.
Because you just can't face up to what a nothing you are.
Hiding.
Right.
Hiding in the bushes.
Mm-hmm.
When the Lord came along. Isn't that a form of dishonesty? Why are you hiding? Why was he hiding? Did he have a good reason to hide? No.
Right.
No, he didn't. He had very good reason to conceal himself, to escape judgment, to escape this conflict.
And the answer he gave, because I
Yeah.
realized we were naked. But that's not why
Yeah.
they were hiding. They were hiding because they were guilty.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And then he wants to pass the buck.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
This woman you gave me.
Yeah.
She talked me into it.
Yeah. So honesty is the battle of the ages. To come to honesty, to be honest, that's the battle of the ages.
Exactly.
And I find myself having to deal with that dishonesty that is in my flesh. It's not in the Lord in me,
Right.
obviously not. And maybe I can give a qualification. Here's the Lord where he will withhold information from people. Like you said, I speak in parables. The people are spoken to in parables so that they don't understand
Mm-hmm.
what's being said. Well, the Lord is concealing something from them. That might be thought of as dishonesty. It's not dishonesty.
Mm-hmm.
It's not dishonesty at all. But just because you withhold information or knowledge from some people doesn't mean you're dishonest.
And what's the intention?
That's what
It's a hard issue whether or not it's dishonesty. Because there's lots of examples in the scriptures of lying. You have a whole paper on it.
Yeah.
Different people lying in different circumstances in the Bible.
Yeah.
And none of them.
Many examples.
Yeah, many examples.
Of the saints lying.
And Rahab, blessed for it.
Yeah, that's right.
Blessed,
Absolutely.
spared,
For
prospered
a whole household.
for lying,
Yeah.
for being dishonest. But that's not dishonest.
What about David, the man after God's heart?
Right.
He lied.
Right.
He pretended.
Yeah, so that he could kill people without any consequences
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
annihilate a whole village.
So we need wisdom to know how to be honest.
Right.
Right. We need wisdom to know what honesty is.
And I think that people, I would say in general, and I think it's summed up in the law kills, but the Spirit sets free.
Mm-hmm.
People are always trying to, and it's everybody, trying to make black and white scenarios.
Right.
Well, you're lying if you're saying something that isn't true.
Right.
And there's a commandment about lying, which isn't true, because scriptures don't say don't bear false witness. They say don't bear false witness against your neighbor.
Right. Yeah.
There might be a time for bearing a false witness, like Rahab lying to the officials of the city.
That's right.
She bore a false witness.
Well, I don't know if that would be classified as a false witness or not, because I think the meaning of that commandment is that you're doing it for evil's sake.
That's what I'm saying.
Where she wasn't doing it.
It was a false witness, but it was not against her neighbor. It was for her neighbor.
Yeah.
Like don't tell a lie to harm your neighbor.
Right.
Don't tell lies at the expense of your neighbor. But there's lots of situations where you can tell a lie for the benefit of your neighbor.
Mm-hmm. And there's the aspect of honesty where somebody just speaks his mind. He's not trying to hide anything. He's not trying to pretend. We have this passage here in John chapter 1, and where Jesus is gathering his disciples, right? And let's see. We'll start in John 1:40 as to give a background here. One of the two which heard John speak, John the Baptist, followed him, was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. He first finds his own brother Simon and says to him, "We have found the Messiah," which is being interpreted the Christ. And he brought him to Jesus. And when Jesus beheld him, he said, "You are Simon, the son of Jonah. You shall be called Cephas," which is by interpretation a stone. And then it goes on, it says, the day following, Jesus would go forth into Galilee and finds Philip. Philip ended up being one of the disciples, one of the 12 apostles, and says to him, "Follow me." Now Philip was of Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip finds Nathanael and says to him, "We have found him, of whom Moses in the law and the prophets did write, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph."
I don't think people recognize the weight of that, what those disciples, these people being called, were going through.
Yeah.
Like they are calling themselves bananas. They're like, yeah, you know what?
Yeah.
This person that all the scriptures have been testifying about.
Yeah.
We found him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And oh yeah, he's a carpenter's son from Nazareth.
Yeah.
That little town, Nazareth.
Yeah. Right. Right.
It wasn't a believable story.
Well, not really, because we go on as we read here.
Right.
So he's talking to Nathanael, and Nathanael said to him, "Can any good thing come out of Nazareth?"
Right.
What are you telling me?
That dump?
Yeah. You know, how is this possible? You're sure you're not mistaken?
Right.
Right? And Philip said, "Come and see." Jesus saw Nathanael coming to him and says of him, here are the words we're after here. "Behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom is no guile."
Mm-hmm.
The Lord hadn't been there. He wasn't there when Philip was speaking to Nathanael.
Mm-hmm.
But the Lord knew where Nathanael was coming from in his answer to Philip. And Nathanael says unto him, "From where do you know me?" And Jesus answered and said to him, "Before that Philip called you, when you were under the fig tree, I saw you."
Mm-hmm.
So you probably heard him too.
Mm-hmm.
And right there, Nathanael knew what was happening here was impossible, humanly speaking. He answered and said to him, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." He was speaking the hidden, speaking the mysterious, speaking the invisible. And Jesus answered and said to him, "Because I said to you, I saw you under the fig tree, do you believe? You shall see greater things than these." And he said to him, "Truly, truly, I say to you, hereafter you shall see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man." There's Nathanael. What I was thinking was that Nathanael was open with his thoughts, and the Lord was telling him he was going to be seeing a lot more than he realized. He was going to be given things to see as a result of maybe, in measure, his honesty.
And I think that scripture there, you can kind of pass over, "Behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom there is no guile," but you almost need to stop halfway through the sentence and say, "Behold,
An Israelite.
an Israelite indeed."
Yeah.
It was a relief.
Yeah.
It's almost like it was part of why the Lord appreciated that line of people.
Yeah.
It's like it defined.
You know what it defined? The Jew.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
That's what a Jew is.
There was that trait there where they
Yeah.
just, and you've talked about being in Israel and how they'd all be arguing with each other,
Yeah.
and they didn't withhold how they were feeling,
Right.
and they didn't really hold it against each other when it was
Right.
over.
When it was over. Business was over with, and they just went back to ordinary life.
They'd have it out, and they'd argue, and they'd
Yeah.
express themselves, and then after that, it was.
And well, it would get into an uproar because one of the Jews would come to me. This was at Habanim, and he'd come to me after the meeting because he might have seen maybe some sort of distress or some sort of anxiety of some kind. I didn't think I was being that anxious. I was seeing the ruckus going on between maybe 20 different people in the room. They were having a business meeting Saturday night to start the next week, and they were debating who's going to do what and how. And they'd really get into it. Like these guys are just hollering at each other. They were hollering at each other, and they were. You could interpret it as fighting. And if you come from Canada, Canadians are
anything seems like fighting.
No kidding. I wasn't disquieted by it, but he came to me and he thought I might be, I guess. And he says, Victor, he says, those guys weren't really. They weren't really fighting. They weren't really angry with each other.
Jews.
But they sure came across like they were angry. That's for sure. And they were shouting at each other, and everybody's hollering away and debating and arguing. They were arguing.
They're debating.
So there was that, and he says when the meeting is over, he says they just put everything away and they're fine.
They were honest.
No hard feelings.
It's kind of like they were honest with each other, and then it was okay.
Pretty much, yeah.
They didn't have to keep
they
it
were
all
more
inside.
straightforward,
Right.
Yeah. But I think I wouldn't really want to use that whole thing as an example of a Jew. Although I've seen that happen with Jews. There's a particular trait even in their unregenerate state where there's a certain degree of honesty, integrity, openness. Just like Nathanael here.
It's like you got the ore with some of the mineral that you want in there.
Yeah, sure.
It's there.
See, and what I was seeing here when I read this days ago was that Jesus was defining what he was after. He was like there were these Jews who were religious, and they went through the ceremonies and rituals and the garb that they wore and everything else.
They turned holding their tongue into a religion. Like many of the religious folks today do. Yeah. They never say anything.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, we're above that. We're going to take the high road.
Yeah. If you don't have anything nice to say,
don't say anything
at all. Yeah. So I think the Lord started off his ministry. There he was gathering his disciples, and he was starting off his ministry by defining what he's after. Behold, an Israelite, indeed. Right. He was saying, here, people, I'm here to tell you what I'm after.
Right.
As a descendant of Abraham, I'm after honesty. I don't want everybody to be so smart that they're outsmarting their neighbor. I want everybody to be so smart as they're honest with one another. Paul, the apostle, said to his people, lie not one to another.
Right.
They're always lying. People are lying everywhere. A lot of stuff out there. It's horrible, and it's in the church systems. It's that's where they're really lying. You have this.
That's where they turn it into an art form.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, you presented that very well, Reverend Martin Van Popka. That was about Easter.
Yeah, I did a few of them.
Yeah. And talk about the epitome of dishonesty right at the pulpit. You had somebody particular in mind,
right? And
I don't care if I named him, and I don't care if you named him. Doesn't matter. The guy was guilty,
right,
of dishonesty.
Totally.
And there he is. He's supposed to be shepherding the Lord's sheep,
and the irony,
which they aren't,
and the irony,
or they wouldn't be listening to the wolf.
The irony of that one is how many people have come and believed that it was legitimate. They can't even see it's a parody.
Right.
I've got the Bible there, and I put a piece of tape over the good news, and I wrote bad on it, and I've got this Bible that says the bad news of the gospel.
Right.
And the people watching are still not comprehending that it's a parody.
Yeah.
And you wonder how dishonest do they have to be?
That's right. They're missing a lot of details there. They're
No
overlooking a
kidding.
lot of stuff.
They're
You know
out-
why? Because they're prejudiced.
Exactly, because they're out for bear. They're out to kill somebody.
Yeah, they want to discredit anything that comes against their beliefs or ways of doing things.
Right,
And the Lord would come along and say, behold, these are not Israelites.
right, indeed, in whom there is no guile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, there's tons of guile here. This is not what I'm after. I'm not after church services. I'm not after denominations. I'm not after formality.
Mhm.
I'm not after phony worship. I don't want you liars lying to my face.
Mhm.
I just want you to be honest and straightforward and simple with me and with your brother. That's what he's after. And so here's Nathanael saying, can any good thing come out of Nazareth?
Mhm.
Like he just opened his mouth
Mhm.
and he said what was on his mind. And the Lord didn't rebuke him,
Mhm.
right?
And there's another huge example that we had talked about. You know, the Lord, the Pharisees come to the Lord and they say, "Come on, show us a sign. Prove to us. Prove to us
Yeah,
that you're the Messiah.
yeah,
Impress us.
Yeah.
Perform for us.
yeah, that's right.
Come on, monkey."
Yeah,
And he says, "Oh, a wicked and rebellious generation, I'll give no sign.
Yeah.
Except the sign of Jonah."
adulterous generation.
And there's Jonah, and you have some things to say about Jonah.
Yes.
Because you look at this story and you're thinking, like, what a jerk.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, there he is. He didn't want to do it. And then when it gets down to it, he's no different than anybody else.
Right.
He was
Yeah.
just being honest.
Yes.
Everybody
Yes.
else is like, if the Lord says I must do this, then I will go. And I will have a good attitude about bless the Lord for
Yeah.
appointing me to this ministry. And
You're
Jonah
right.
was like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
Oh, God, come on. I'm not doing it. I'm just not doing it.
Yeah.
And then he ends up in the ocean
Yeah.
and everything's going, and he's just like, it's me. God
Yeah.
told me to do this thing. I didn't do it. Now
Yeah.
he's mad.
Yeah.
Just throw me over and you'll be fine.
Well, he just ran away from the Lord to begin with. He just didn't want the job.
Right.
And then when he went to Nineveh, he wasn't even wanting to see them saved.
Right.
He wanted to see them destroyed. Yet 40 days and this city will be destroyed.
Yeah.
Right?
And when it didn't happen, he wasn't just like, oh, good. The Lord is merciful.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Lord, for saving this city.
Right.
He was just like, I see, this is why.
Yeah.
This is why I was headed for the hills.
Yeah.
I knew this was going to happen.
Yeah.
You're always being merciful.
Yeah.
Making a fool out of me.
Yeah.
Right.
And I want to back up a little bit because he took a ship,
Right.
right? And the Lord sends a storm.
Right.
Right? So it gets really, really rough.
Mhm.
Now, all these sailors, they're all what they would call the heathen.
Well, they're sailors, if you ever met sailors.
Swearing like a sailor.
Right.
And there they were in real trouble. And they were saying, every man calling his God.
Mm-hmm.
We're in real trouble. We're
Mhm.
going down. And then they find Jonah fast asleep in the ship's hold.
Right.
I don't know how he could sleep when they're.
And, you know, I
Boat's
never
going all over the
noticed.
place.
That's the same thing Jesus did.
Yeah, I did.
I
That's
never
right.
noticed that.
Yeah.
But that's
Yeah. I couldn't understand how Jesus could just sleep. Well, okay, so that's Jesus. But he was human. He was in human form. He had to take upon himself the weakness, the frailness.
right.
So he
But there was
suffered
faith.
things. There was
And Jonah had faith.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like it.
Yeah. And honesty.
Mhm.
That's our little
And who would admit to all those people
right.
that it was their fault?
Right.
And
That's
risk them all being angry and even just be like, look, here's what you got to do.
Yeah.
You ain't going to make it unless you toss me overboard.
Yeah, he says, I'm the man.
Right.
You know, Nathan had to come to David and say, you are the man.
Mhm.
David was being dishonest,
Mhm.
right? Very dishonest. And when the sailors were saying, who are you? What are you doing sleeping when we're in trouble? He says, call on your God.
Mhm.
They were wanting everybody to be calling on their God. And Jonah says, look no further. I'm the man.
Right.
This meant his death.
Right.
He willingly died. He says, throw me over
Right.
and the storm will stop.
Right.
He prophesied.
And isn't that what Jesus did too?
Yes.
Throw me overboard.
Yeah.
Bury me in the earth and the storm will stop.
Amen. Amen. Yeah. The enemy will lose his power.
Mhm.
When we yield to the truth and become honest, the enemy loses His power.
Amen.
In all of our circumstances. If we just get honest, I've seen that many times where the enemy will come at me and accost me and fault me and criticize me and laugh at me until I turn honest, until I admit to my weakness or to my fault,
Mhm.
or that I'm the guilty one of some particular thing,
Mhm.
and then boom, it's gone.
Mhm.
It's gone. Isn't that something?
Mhm.
That's the lesson of honesty, is when you get honest. And I don't mean for evil's sake. I don't mean to just put somebody down or tattle on somebody or nothing like that. That's all garbage. That's all evil. But when you admit to your fault, to your weakness, where you're confronted on it, something happens. Something snaps. Anyway, Jonah was thrown overboard, right?
Mhm.
Thrown overboard. And wasn't it here were the unbelieving sailors.
Mhm.
They tried their hardest to save Jonah.
Mhm.
They tried their hardest. Didn't work.
And isn't that? I mean, I'm just throwing it out there. Isn't that kind of what Peter was doing with the Lord? He said, "No, don't go to Jerusalem. Don't say these things.
Right.
You can't do that. Come
Yeah.
on." And the
Yeah.
sailors were saying, "Oh, Jonah, don't. No."
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was Satan. That was
Yeah.
the flesh.
Yeah.
And the sailors were trying to save Jonah.
Yeah.
And Jonah was like, "No, you don't understand how this goes down.
Right.
There's only one solution here."
Yeah. That's right. And he told them what would happen if they did that. So finally they caved. They said, okay, all right, it's your decision. They throw him overboard.
And everything went calm.
Everything went on. And then for 3 days and 3 nights,
Mm-hmm.
he's wrestling in the belly of a whale.
Right.
Right? And he had to come to the place of submission. All right, so he was honest,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't enough.
Mm-hmm.
It takes more than honesty.
Right.
Obedience. Try obedience to the Lord.
So then he was willing to do it.
Yeah.
And he still was kind of unpleasant about it the whole way.
Grudgingly, but
Yeah.
but he went. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he went a day's journey
Mm-hmm.
into Nineveh, which was 3 days journey
In
wide.
72
Big.
hours,
Yeah.
for being specific.
Right. Yeah. There's somebody out there being dishonest about the number
I think
of
so.
days and
I
nights.
think so.
I mean,
I don't think 36
he-
is enough.
right. Well, it wasn't even 36. Friday night till Sunday morning, it wasn't there anymore. Where do you find 36?
Right. Right.
Right? It was more like, I don't know, 18, 24, somewhere there. But it sure wasn't 3.
Right.
It
Just
wasn't
like-
3.
It's just like Abraham going out to Mount Moriah with Isaac.
3 days.
3 days. And nobody in there is thinking,
Yeah, he left Friday
a
night.
day, a night, and a day. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
close enough. A day and a half is kind of like 3 days, right?
This 3 days and 3 nights thing, Martin, that is so dishonest.
Mm-hmm.
So very dishonest.
Mm-hmm.
It's wickedness.
Mhm.
So it's what it is. I don't care. You can be the Pope, you can be the priest, you can be a cardinal or a bishop, whatever else. You're being dishonest.
And they,
Maybe naively so, maybe ignorantly so, maybe you don't mean evil, but it's the lies you've been brought up with. And yet Jesus said there would only be one sign given. One sign given to
and
the
that
world.
side they trash.
Yeah,
So it's not just your ordinary
Isn't that
dishonesty.
amazing? Yeah.
Not just your
No.
ordinary dishonesty.
that's right.
He says, "I'll give you one sign," and they take that one sign, and they make a fool of it. They disgrace it.
Yeah.
They delegitimize it. They call Jesus Christ a hack.
Yes.
Day and a half. It's close enough. I mean, you have to understand the language and the culture, and the context.
Yeah.
You know, like, and as if Jesus was going to be that ambiguous about it.
That's right.
Jonah was in the belly of the whale for 3 days and 3 nights. That's
As-
specified.
yeah.
And
That's
and
right.
so why would Jesus, with all the power in the world,
Yeah.
do a half job on
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
It doesn't
Why
make any
should he?
sense. Why should he? Why would you leave it open for anyone to dispute you?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Satan comes along and tells a lie, and I think that's part of the dishonesty, is that people love lies.
Yeah.
It's hard to be honest when
Yeah.
you still love lies.
They'll believe any lie before they'll ever believe
It's all
the truth.
credible. It's all believable. It's all understandable.
That's the mystery of iniquity,
Right.
right? It's the mystery of iniquity. This lawlessness that beats in the chest of all humanity.
Mhm.
It's a horrible thing, but that's it. Your nature becomes a liar when you've disobeyed the Lord
Mhm.
in the Garden of Eden. You become that by nature. You can't speak the truth.
It's not in your nature.
You can't be honest.
Cats,
It's impossible.
Cats don't bark.
That's right. That's right.
It's not in your nature. When they try to, it's not believable.
So when Jesus was speaking to Nathanael there, he was saying, "Behold, an Israelite indeed."
Mm-hmm.
Here's what a Jew is all about. It's not about circumcision.
Right.
Yes, God commanded circumcision, but it's not about circumcision. Paul points out in his epistles that that Abraham was faith was accounted to Abraham for righteousness
Mm-hmm.
before he was circumcised.
Right.
Right. So it wasn't circumcision that made him right.
Right.
But that's how it's played by the carnal Jew.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I go to the synagogue. Oh, I read the Talmud, which is an ungodly document.
Mm-hmm.
I dress in my phylacteries and whatever else. I do this and I do that. It's just like that Pharisee looking at the publican.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I tithe, I do this, I do that. Right? They're being totally, totally dishonest. They're being self-righteous.
Mm-hmm.
To be self-righteous is pure dishonesty.
Well, nobody has any righteous.
That's right.
So if you're saying you do.
Yeah. And it was faith that was accounted to Abraham for righteousness, nothing else.
Right.
It wasn't religion. It wasn't any kind of supreme act of any kind,
Mm-hmm.
even though he did sacrifice Isaac, potentially, technically, whatever you want to say.
He had in his heart.
Yeah.
He committed to it.
Yeah, he loved the Lord. He believed him. He was persuaded that God could raise Isaac from the dead.
Mm-hmm. He believed in the
He
resurrection.
believed in the resurrection.
Because the Lord said he would be the promised son.
And Martin, that's what we have to believe in. It's the resurrection.
Yes.
And Jesus said, "I am the resurrection and the life." He's the resurrection.
Yes.
Believe in the resurrection, and you come out of that place where the enemy can mock you because you're being dishonest.
Mm-hmm.
And it's happening all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you squirm a little when somebody tries to confront you in something. You're reluctant to fess up,
Mm-hmm.
just in ordinary things all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, well, you know, sometimes you tell little white lies so that you don't hurt somebody's feelings. Well, you don't have to hurt people's feelings.
And it depends on the situation.
Sure it does.
It depends on the situation. But I would say that they're telling a white, I mean, I don't know about telling a white lie, but like if you can be concerned legitimately for the well-being of somebody else,
Mm-hmm.
and you can exercise.
That's a big quality,
I understand.
qualification.
Because most of the time when people are telling a white lie to take it easy, really they just don't like the idea of confrontation.
Yeah.
And they're sparing themselves in the name
That's right.
of sparing somebody else, and that itself is dishonesty.
Yeah, that's right.
But if you're actually able to spare that person for their sake, I don't think there's something wrong with that.
Well, and here's something else. If you do tell someone the truth about themselves, not in an ugly manner, not in a negative manner in any way,
Mm-hmm.
and that person hears it, and maybe they haven't heard it before,
Mm-hmm.
right? If they're honest,
Mm-hmm.
if they're open to honesty, they'll face that reality about themselves
Mm-hmm.
that you've opened up to them.
Right.
And they'll be blessed by
Right.
knowing the truth about themselves instead of trying to maybe avoid it, or somebody's just, I just hope nobody sees this or recognizes this or
Right.
avoids the subject matter.
And if you're, going back to what I said, if you're able to care about them, then you won't be facilitating that person avoiding their issues.
Yes.
You'd be facilitating.
You are drawing them to honesty.
That's what I'm
You're
saying.
offering them that invitation to honesty.
But I'm just saying there are some situations, and I don't know if I can invent any on the spot, where there's no need to shame somebody for no reason.
Right. No.
When there's no downside. There's no missed opportunity from just being silent in a certain matter.
Right.
And so it just
You have to have wisdom.
you have to have that wisdom, and you have to be asking the Lord what you should be doing.
Yeah.
If there's any question, if there's any confusion,
Yeah.
you have to be asking Him.
It can be pretty easy to be honest about something ugly about somebody else.
Totally.
Piece of cake, you can just mouth it off right there.
Right.
I've done it.
And are you being, the only justifiable reason for that would be to prevent an evil, or to help that person, to draw them, like you say, towards the truth.
Yeah.
But if you're only doing it because it feels good to put people down, that's not honesty anymore.
No, it's not. That's murder.
Exactly.
That's murder. That's hating your brother.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then if you're doing
I don't care if it's momentary.
right.
It's still that aspect. It's still that
If it's
demonstration
if you're
of it.
just trying to harm them, if you're just trying to jab at them, if you're trying to then that's not good at all.
No.
And
And I've been guilty of that many
That's
times, Martin.
Mhm.
It's no place to be.
easily.
And you will live to regret it. I can just tell everybody you'll live to regret it.
Mhm.
You will. Yeah.
I'm kidding.
Yeah, it makes me want to cry to think about that.
And the scripture there, behold, the Israelite. It's almost like the Lord was saying, I can work with this.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like it's like, because Nathanael, you can't necessarily stay there thinking, can anything good come from Nazareth?
Mm-hmm.
It's not exactly a perspective that should be encouraged or should remain. It wasn't that perspective that the Lord was pleased or approving of.
Right.
It's just he wasn't full of full of BS.
Yeah.
And
That's right.
and you can and
That's bologna sandwiches.
Of
Is that right?
Of course.
You need to be a little more
To be
discreet
honest about it.
to seafood.
That's what I honestly meant, yes. And you meet some people like that possess that trait to some, but it's kind of nice. Like if you meet somebody and they're a little rough and blunt, and you can get
It
over.
can be refreshing.
I know, you can kind of just get over yourself for a second.
Yeah.
Just be like, but on the flip side, I think we got a customer like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like he can be pretty direct about what he's displeased with.
Yeah.
And yet you never really have to be that concerned that he's
Okay,
being
get you.
passive aggressive with you or anything. Because if there was anything he was unhappy with, he'd just tell you. I didn't like the sausage. It was different than it was last time. I don't think it was salty enough. Just do something about that.
Yeah.
And you're kind of like, well, people don't normally say that, but and so I get to the point where when I get new sausage made, I'm like, you need to try this and tell me what you think.
Right.
Because at least you can get feedback from the guy.
Something else I find, Martin, is that if we let that honesty out, let other people say things that normally you may not care for them to say or may not be a pleasant thing, but if you stop and consider, if they're telling you the truth, and then you stop and consider, you end up prospering. You end up changing something for the better, whether it's in your own attitude or activity or circumstances.
And you can do the same thing for other people. And
exactly.
I'm not.
It's always productive. It's always positive. Even if it comes across at first like it's, I don't want to go there, kind of thing. And that's honesty.
Right.
Okay, so I don't like things that come against me, but to be honest, he's right.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to take that and go with it. I want to be honest. Lo and behold, things start to change. Something happens. There's this leaven working in the atmosphere. It's refreshing. I was in a conference once, and we're in the washrooms, and I'm trying to sell somebody a chi machine. It was a doctor. It was a Jewish doctor.
Right.
He's at the urinal, and I'm at a urinal or a sink or whatever it was, and he just came straight up with an honest opinion of where I was coming from. Like he says, you're being pretty forward about this. You're being pretty aggressive or something like that. I don't remember the words anymore. I wish I could, but I don't. And he says, you're too zealous. You're not being objective.
Mm-hmm.
and I knew what he was saying. And you know what? Normally speaking, you could get offended to something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, wow, he's being just candid with me. That's
Right.
I like that. It was one of the rare times when I did immediately like it.
Right.
He just has, and he wasn't trying to be nice and mushy.
Right.
But that was great.
I remember my framing boss way back in the day, and I mean, I'm almost ashamed at how forward I was because I'm not sure I had a filter. But yeah, and he kind of liked me well enough, but he treated the crew pretty rough, and I just couldn't work for him anymore. Cause, I mean, the crew was starting to resent me because he wasn't being rough with me. And anyway, it was, and I didn't. I was kind of bored too, so I quit. And I came to get my paycheck, and he said, "You're gonna come up and grab the tools. Let's go, man." And I just told him, I said, you're gonna die alone if you keep acting this way. That's what's gonna happen.
Mm-hmm.
I said, nobody's gonna want to be around you. You're just gonna be unhappy, and you're gonna die all by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You can't keep acting that way. And he was probably 45, and I was 21.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why I felt like I had to tell him that I should have got the envelope and leave, but he never held it against me, and I was kind of apprehensive about telling him, and I don't know, I said it.
Yeah.
And he just looked at me and, okay, you know what? And he said, I actually appreciate your honesty and your candor with me. And if you ever want a job, call me.
Yeah. Amen.
And he was pleasant. I actually called him many years later just to tell him I appreciated him on a few situations that we experienced on the job site. And he remembered me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but I guess my point is not so much that I said it, but that
moments like that. Excuse me, Mark. Yeah. Moments like that are memorable.
Yes.
They strike. They penetrate.
It was like I and he was on his third wife or something, and I was just like, I gotta tell you, somebody has. I don't think anybody's telling you. And he was so intense, and so everybody was afraid of him, and so I don't think anybody was ever really honest with him.
Right. Yeah.
And my point in bringing it up though is that don't just assume people are going to react negatively to your honesty. Like, many people will, don't get me wrong. Lots of people can't stand it, and they get all offended and wiped out.
Yeah.
But you can't just protect yourself because you're assuming that the other guy is going to react poorly. You can't just keep, you know what I mean? Like,
right. Yeah.
Protecting your own interests.
Yeah.
Because maybe they need to hear it.
Yeah.
And maybe you're the one to tell them. And not that that's a justification for just. I mean, I've certainly been overly blunt with people. I've not known what to do in a lot of circumstances, so I'm just like, there it is. And sometimes I regret it. I'm like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. I was just taking the easy way out because it was easier for me to be blunt.
Yeah.
I didn't demonstrate any consideration.
Yeah.
So there's both sides of it. But I'm just, if you're not being nasty about it, if you don't have ill will, there are some people who are able to receive it. Not everybody.
Right.
But if they can see that you're not, because I liked him, and I think he knew I liked him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I would have lunch in his little portable office instead of with the guys. Yeah. It was, you know.
And when you said what you said to him, he would have known that
I didn't have anything against him.
You didn't have any ill will against him.
Right.
And he would have known also that you were kind of risking some of your own advantage.
Right.
You know, favor with him or whatever it is.
Yeah.
By saying those things.
Right.
He knew that.
So it's just don't write people off and just assume they're going to be. You can't just assume how people are going to react. Yeah. And I think we project ourselves onto people an awful lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you think they're going to react like how I would react. And you get all worked up. But sometimes it's just like, just say, well, you know, it was with Jonathan the other day. I sent him to his boss there. And I said, just be honest with him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just lay it all out on the table. Just be honest.
Yeah.
And it's going to turn out just fine. And sure enough, everything was fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And quite favorable.
Yeah, that's right. And surprising.
You're right.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. But
Yeah.
I think we can kind of be sort of so unwilling to be honest ourselves that we just assume that everybody else will hate honesty too.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's not the case. If you're just vulnerable and honest, I think other people can be freed from their fear.
Yes.
And just be like, oh, well, if you're going to play all your cards on the table, here, this is what I have.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was going to be. I didn't know we don't have to have all our armor on. We can move around freely now instead of clunk, 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 clunk.
Yeah.
You know, you can just,
Sure.
like David, he went without armor.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, he didn't have, that's what the dishonesty is. It's
Yes.
armor.
He was being honest with himself. Look, I can do much better with a sling and stone, even though it seems to be like a very inferior weapon
Right.
to this giant that I have to face.
Right.
But it's my thing, and I'm not good with that. I'd be pretending.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be honest with myself.
That's too burdensome.
Yeah, I just haven't tried. I haven't proved this stuff.
Right.
What's proof if it isn't evidence of truth and reality?
And it's not as though David never wore any armor. I'm sure when he was a fit soldier fighting all those wars,
Sure.
he wore armor.
Yeah.
But he was just a shepherd boy, and he wasn't going to come presuming to be a soldier.
Yeah.
Putting on all the attire and
Yeah.
just like, I'm just going to.
His brothers were there.
Yeah.
All his older brothers, they were there in their outfits.
He was just like, I'm just going to do me.
Yeah.
Taking down a few bears and lions. Like, just when you get a hold of this.
Well, at least one of each.
Right.
Stop lying, Ron.
Right.
But there he was, and his brothers were
You're embarrassing us.
yeah,
David. Come on.
were criticizing him.
Well,
What are you
you're
doing here?
just-
You're
you're
supposed
just
to be
here.
up there. What are you doing away from the sheep and doing your job?
You just got a sick fascination with battle. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, right. Yeah. And David says, "What I do? What I do?"
Come on. I'm just bringing you some cheese and raisin cakes.
You're right.
You're right.
Yeah. You know, honesty in itself is a wonderful reward. You don't live in that fear. You don't live in that doubt. You don't live in that regret. You just open yourself up and you sleep better.
Mm-hmm. And you know what? You laugh more.
You do.
You do. 'Cause,
Yeah, absolutely, you do.
you know, and that's why the left is always trying to censor comedians. It's because the comedians, they know that honesty is funny.
Yeah, like J.P. Sears.
Yeah,
for
right.
example. You know, the court jester type.
Yeah,
Approach.
but honesty is hilarious.
Yeah.
Like when you start even if it's at your own expense.
Yeah.
I mean, people know it's funny to make a joke at somebody else's expense.
Right.
But some of the best humor is at your own expense.
Yeah.
You offer yourself
Yeah.
up to be laughed at,
Yeah.
and because it's there.
Yeah.
And honesty is
Yeah.
it can be really funny.
Yeah. Yeah. It can.
But dishonesty is almost never funny.
True.
That's why, like,
For
there's-
sure. You know, one of the most, to me, a bad example of bad humor and comedy is Don Rickles.
I don't know.
Anybody that knows Don Rickles knows what I'm talking about. And I'll just say it. It's not a good thing. I'd like to see something change, something different. But he's devastated a lot of lives just by his cruelty.
It's always just at somebody's
Humor
expense.
is somebody
Yeah.
else's expense, right? That's not good.
And the good comedians are able to laugh at themselves.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
bad ones are trying to get you to laugh at everybody else.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, there's not very many leftist comedians in that sense. They're just not funny.
Yeah.
It's just
No.
you don't see much humor coming out. Like when the leftists were trying to make jokes about Trump,
Right.
it was like, come on, guys.
Right.
Like, I would laugh if you were funny,
Yeah.
but this is lame.
Yeah.
But the other way around, I mean, there's no end of material.
Yeah, and they have to resort to sexual
Right.
garbage to try and get people laughing. You're not being honest with yourself as that comedian.
Right.
You can't come up with honest values
Right.
about people.
Yeah.
And to see the light side, the funny side,
Right.
you know, and you're not being honest about yourself because right away you're poking at somebody else. Poke
Yeah.
at yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Right.
We've lost those days. There were some pretty good comedians. Red Skelton, Bob Hope.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of those guys, they had some good stuff
Yeah.
going for them.
Yeah, it wasn't at everybody's expense.
No, that's right. Unless it was coming to them.
Yeah. The story of Esther. Some good comedy there.
Oh, that's the funniest book in the Bible.
Absolutely.
The Book of Esther. Just bad and bad.
Shakespeare's
bad.
got nothing. His tragedies have nothing on Haman's tragedy.
Yeah. I think maybe we could stop the thing here. Just to sign off. If we have more to say, fine. I don't care. But the Lord was setting the tone for what a true Jew is.
Right.
Behold, an Israelite,
Mm-hmm.
indeed. And if you go to the end of Romans, or end of Romans 2, right? Just to clarify that whole thing, because people have this great controversy about what is a Jew, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is a Jew? And in Israel right now, they don't know what a Jew is.
I know.
They don't know what a Jew is.
Does your mother have to be? Does your father?
Yeah.
How many generations?
Sure, all of that stuff.
Are you the right kind of Jew?
Yeah.
Is it just the religion? Is it just being a citizen?
And you believe in Jesus? You were circumcised, your father was a Jew, your mother was a Jew, you've got all the credentials. You're not allowed in Israel because you believe in Jesus.
Right.
You're not allowed here.
You follow a Jew, and so you're not a Jew.
And if we had the theocratic government that we had in the old days, that's off comes his head, or he's stoned. That was their method of execution. Who's being honest with what? Where? Paul went to Israel, couldn't stay there. He was a bona fide flesh and blood Jew, but he wasn't going to deny his confession of Jesus Christ.
Right.
They wouldn't let him stay in Israel. And yet their policy, their law is, if you step on foreign soil, on not on foreign soil, but on Israeli soil,
mm-hmm.
you're automatically a citizen of Israel because you're a Jew.
If you have a Jewish lineage.
Yeah. Yes.
And I think having a Jewish mother and father and the last name Cohen.
Yeah. No kidding. I mean, if there was anybody that was a bona fide Jew in the flesh,
Come
there
on.
he was.
He had a Jew nose, talked like a Jew.
Yeah. Sure.
Yes.
Everything.
I mean,
It was all there.
He was a quintessential Jew.
The whole package was there.
Yeah.
They lied.
Right.
Why? Because they hate the truth.
Right.
Who's the truth? He is honesty.
Right.
Jesus Christ, the Messiah.
Right.
The Messiah not only of Israel, but of the entire world.
Mm-hmm.
People, Jesus Christ is the Messiah of the entire world, for all ages. That's who he is. So what is a true Jew? The Lord chose Abraham and his seed after Isaac, Jacob. And he called a people out. He made a people, right, in the furnace of Egypt. And he was going to set up a nation that would be a light to the Gentiles, a light to the world.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus Christ came through that lineage.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But anyway, Paul says here in the end of Romans 2, Paul says, for he is not a Jew, which is one outwardly, neither is that circumcision, which is outward in the flesh. It's not a Jew. People try to decide, well, who's a Jew, who isn't a Jew? It's not circumcision that makes a Jew. But he is a Jew, which is one inwardly.
Mm-hmm.
Behold, an Israelite indeed,
mm-hmm.
in whom is honesty,
mm-hmm.
in whom there is no guile.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He's not being evasive. He's not trying to hide or anything like that. He's just expressing himself. But he is a Jew, which is one inwardly, and circumcision is that of the heart in the spirit and not in the letter. All these people who are being very religious, they're demonstrating that they're not Jews in the spirit.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's happening. That's what's happening. They would know that the outward trappings are not what God is after. They're not what constitutes a true Jew. That's not what God is after. So right at the very beginning of Jesus' ministry, he says, this is an Israelite. You want to know what an Israelite is? And this is our job. I'm calling you men as my apostles, my disciples, because I want you to know that we are out to turn men into Jews. We're out. I'm here to make you fishers of men.
Mm-hmm.
We want honest people, and that's the message we're taking.
Mhm.
That's what has to happen. So, all right. So I just wanted to finish this off by reading this verse, Romans 2:29. It says, "But he is a Jew, which is one inwardly, and circumcision is that of the heart, in the spirit, and not in the letter, whose praise is not of him." You know, what are they doing with all these wrappings and the clothing and these silly hats? I need to be honest, right? Silly hats. God is making fools of them. They're just looking like idiots
Right.
with all their religious garb. That's all they are. And they think that they're better. Somehow and the women, what? They shave their heads and put on a wig? I mean, how ridiculous can you get?
Isn't that dishonest?
God gives them good, healthy hair. So what do? They shave it off and put on a wig and maybe a shawl or whatever else.
And then
Crazy.
And then they have all kinds of moral conundrums that they ponder.
No
and they're
kidding.
like, but these wigs we're wearing, it turns out that the hair from these wigs comes from Buddhist temples where these women are offering their hair to the gods.
Yeah.
And the Buddhist monks are like, thanks a bunch, we'll sell this to the Jews.
Yeah.
And the Jews are like, is it kosher to have hair offered to the gods?
Yeah. Total contradiction.
Total madness.
The Lord, you know what? When people are dishonest, because that's what they're being, they're pretending to be something they're not. They're hypocrites.
Right.
And they might be, a lot of people be more naive than so many others. If they're raised in the whole thing, they didn't know any better. But there are others who have been confronted with a little bit of reality, a little bit of truth. And just listen to me, what I'm saying here right now. It doesn't make any sense, the things that we're trying to tell people. And they are being dishonest.
Mm-hmm.
Aren't they dishonest when they the women shave their heads and cover their heads with a wig instead, somebody else's hair?
Well,
How is that not dishonest?
Because they believe that their hair has to be covered and it can't be showing, but they don't really feel like wearing head coverings.
Right.
And so they shave off all their hair so that their hair is not showing.
Yeah.
And they make the head covering somebody else's hair.
Yeah.
So now they can still be attractive women without wearing a head covering. I mean, it's a perfect example of the insanity of religiosity.
Yes. Yeah. And they're demonstrating that they are not Jews.
And
they're not Jews.
And
they're liars.
Nature, the Lord came confronting that nature in his ministry. And that's part of what he was contrasting Nathanael to.
Yeah, that's right.
Because he was dealing with the rampant, and I'm not saying they were exceptionally more dishonest than others, but the Jews were not being honest.
Yeah.
They were being very dishonest. And he's confronting, you tithe the dill, mint, and cumin.
Yeah.
But the money you're supposed to be taking care of your parents with is dedicated to the Lord.
Yeah.
And so it's really actually holy that you're not taking care of your parents.
Yeah.
He was dealing with all that dishonesty.
Yeah.
And that was pleasing to the people, and that's your scripture there, right?
Yeah.
Right? The Pharisees had the praise of men, and the Lord addressed that theme over and over again.
Yeah.
You're in the streets, you're repeating your prayers, you're giving your offerings.
Long prayers.
And you make sure everybody knows it.
Yeah.
And there was Nathanael, and he was like, isn't that place a dump? Like, seriously? Ah.
Yeah.
And it wasn't evil of him. But it looks evil to people.
Yeah.
People consider that to be ugliness.
Yeah.
And the other to be
to
be looked up to. That's
that which is highly esteemed among men.
Exactly.
Is abomination with God.
Right.
Yeah. Whose praise is not of men but of God. That's what God is after.
Because if everybody's impressed with you,
if we're going to be honest, we are going to please God. We are going to want to please God. If we're being honest with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Well, first of all, I think the first step of being honest with yourself is you don't want to please God. There was Jonah. He wasn't necessarily interested in pleasing God.
Right.
And he came right out and admitted it.
To God.
To
himself.
God. To God himself.
Yeah.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah. So first of all, you have to be honest for the wrong reasons maybe? Would you call it that?
Yeah.
Or just plain honest?
See, and that's the thing, is that the honesty itself seems like it's a justification for just being like, hey, this is the way I am.
Yeah.
You deal with all kinds of rough people and be like, this is what you get.
People want to be ugly, they want to be honest about their ugliness, and they want to be honest about being ugly.
That's not what we're talking about. But
right.
But if you're admitting your current state and not necessarily saying, this is the way I should be, this is how I want to be,
Yeah.
this is how I plan on being,
Yeah.
but at the very least, you're like, this is where I'm at. It's probably not good enough, but
Yeah.
I'm not going to, oh, yes, God, absolutely. And that's what the Lord was saying there when he says the two sons. And the one says, oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah,
Right.
I'll get right on it, Dad.
Yeah.
And he's not doing it. And then the other one is like, I really don't want to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And like Jonah, I don't really want to. And he ended up doing it anyway.
Yeah. And he was the one son, and you might think, though, that's a pretty poor sign. I mean, this guy's disobeying God. He's running from God. Well, why can't he obey God?
Mm-hmm.
But Abraham wasn't obeying the law of God when God called on him to sacrifice Isaac.
Mm-hmm. Right. And it should be of some comfort that even though we can look at Jonah's honesty and say, oh, that's not godly,
Right.
it still had the power to deliver all the sailors
Yeah.
and the whole city of Nineveh.
Yeah, that's right.
And so, you can call it ugly, you can call it undesirable, you can call it rebellious, defiant.
Yeah.
And yet there was still the power of salvation in just being frank with God and neighbor the whole way through.
And Pilate, when Jesus was standing before Pilate, he marveled. He would question Jesus, and Jesus wouldn't say anything. And he marveled at him. Mm-hmm. Because most of the people that were called up and accused of a crime that would cost them their lives, right? Mm-hmm. Capital offense, they'd be falling at his feet. They'd be crying. They'd be begging for mercy.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Protesting their innocence.
Protesting their innocence. Jesus never said a word. But then when he says, "Are you the King of the Jews?"
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "I am. I am."
Mm-hmm. That would have been pretty disconcerting for Pilate.
It would have been.
Yeah, no kidding.
But he was honest. What I'm pointing out,
mm-hmm.
there was honesty.
And he knew that honesty would get him killed.
Yes, that's right.
He knew very well he was being asked the question.
Yeah.
And he had to give the answer.
Yeah.
And he gave the answer.
Yeah.
And the dishonesty of men had him killed.
That sealed his fate, to be honest.
Yeah.
And here we are alive, given the opportunity to love him, to obey him,
mm-hmm.
to be honest.
Mm-hmm.